Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, June 7th. This is your daily Buckeye Fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 87 days, the game against Michigan in 173 days. That Minnesota game is the topic of today's show. The Gophers are coming off a 3-4 season. Two of those losses came in overtime on missed kicks, including one in the season finale against Wisconsin. So might have been a little better than that record indicated. Gophers beat writer Andy Greder of the St. Paul Pioneer Press and TwinCities.com is my guest today. Andy, PJ Fleck looked like he had things kind of going in the right direction in 2019. They had 11 wins, including an Outback Bowl win. And then last year was a step backward. So was that just kind of like bad luck? And yeah, we all kind of had a weird year, or is that something that Gopher fans are maybe a little bit worried about right now?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of great circumstances that went together in 2019. They had a lot of depth, a lot of talent. Some games broke their way. So it's kind of lightning in a bottle in a certain sense that they played as well as they did in 2019. In 2020, their biggest issue was defensively. They lost 7 starters from that team. Obviously, Antoine Winfield Jr. is the headliner. 4 of those guys went to the NFL, were draft picks. For Minnesota, that's a huge number. So they had a lot of issues in the back 7 with guys that went to the NFL, and it took a long time for them to figure things out. COVID obviously played a role in it. They had 2 games canceled because of it. They played another game with 30-some players. You mentioned 2 games that came down to miss kicks that turned into losses. So if things kind of break their way a little bit differently, maybe this is a 5-2 team instead of a 3-4 team. But they had issues and some breaks that didn't go their way, and obviously COVID was a problem for them.
Ohio State hasn't played the Gophers since 2018, but as I was looking through, I kept looking at names going like, that guy played in 2018. How is he still around? And it was like over and over and over again. The first one of those guys is Tanner Morgan. He did not start in that game against Ohio State. That was Anixtad steading in his place. But, he is going into his 4th season as a starter now. I mean, that is a luxury that very few programs in the country have. So how much are they going to be putting on Tanner Morgan's shoulders this fall?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about 2019. He was great that season. And with Kirk Shiraka, who then went to Ohio State in 2020, they had a new offensive coordinator, and Tanner struggled. He didn't always feel, super comfortable in the pocket or make all the plays that he had. And losing Tyler Johnson to the NFL was part of it. But with Mike Sanford back for a second year and both of those guys on the same page, they feel they'll have a more cohesive relationship, and they hope that Tanner can return back to the 2019 form that he had. When he was at the Horseshoe in 2018, it was one of his first games as a college player, and now he's coming back as a seasoned veteran who has the opportunity of a COVID year to keep his eligibility. So yeah, I think that a lot will be riding on him. Rashod Bateman is gone to the NFL, so Tyler Johnson and Rashod Bateman are gone, and Mo Ibrahim is going to be relied on even more. He was the Big Ten running back of the year last year, and they love to play trestle ball. Obviously, that's something that's very familiar to Buckeye fans, but PJ Fleck in his 1 year as a grad assistant there in 2006 has really taken that mindset to the way he wants to play, and there'll be a steady diet of Mo Ibrahim coming your way in the season opener.
Well, yeah, and he is back he's another of those 4th season guys. He averaged 5.7, 5.3, and 5.4 yards per carry in the last 3 years. So, I mean, assuming he's healthy, it seems like they should have a pretty good sense what to expect again this fall. And it seems like that's a back you can kind of ride for a while.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was, just incredible last year. He had over 200 carries in 7 games. Sometimes was carrying the ball 40 times. Had 15 touchdowns in 7 games. Like I said, was Big Ten running back of the year. Just had a huge workload and benefited from it. PJ has had other times in his career kind of running back by committee approach, and has kind of liked that aspect to keep guys fresh. And this year he says that Mo will take the lion's share of the workload, and he'll be in that spot unless he's dinged up. So it's a very different kind of philosophy that he's embracing this year, and it's certainly warranted because he thinks that Mo Ibrahim is one of the best running backs, one of the best players in college football.
They have a lot of these guys back. One guy they don't have back, you mentioned earlier, Rashod Bateman. he just became the first Gopher receiver to ever be picked in the first round of the draft. That's one of those like, is that right? You wrote it, so it must be right. The receiving situation, though, sounds like it outside of him, it's fairly settled. But I mean, how big of a hole does he leave behind?
Oh, it's a huge hole. Yeah, I mean the Gophers are not known as a program that has a rich NFL history. So when you lose a first round type talent in Rashod Bateman, it's certainly going to leave a hole, but it's also not something that they haven't dealt with before. He opted out at the tail end of last year, so they were without him for the final stretch. Chris Ottman-Bell, who would have played in that horseshoe game as well as maybe a third or fourth wide receiver at that time, is the number one now, and he was that at the end of last year and has shown an ability to make plays and be considered a bell cow type. Who else is going to be in that passing game is going to be a big question mark. Daniel Jackson had some flashes as a true freshman, but is going to have a much bigger workload this year. Brevin Spanford, a 6'7" tight end who was one of the top recruits in the state of Minnesota a couple of years ago, hasn't been able to put it all together yet. He's expected to be, more of a pass catching type. So yeah, that's one of the biggest question marks is you're able to stack the box and take away Mo Ibrahim out of the running game, that you can isolate and bracket cover Chris Ottman-Bell and make the other guys around them beat the Buckeyes. And that's going to be the biggest thing that the Gophers are going to have to overcome, not only in the season opener, but likely all year.
That sounds like it's not a terrible matchup for Ohio State, because I think the question Ohio State has is a lot in that defensive backfield. So if there's just kind of more one guy to worry about and you worry about stopping the run and make them beat you a different way, that's probably not a terrible matchup for Ohio State. One guy who is not a great matchup for anyone is Daniel Fa'alele. You may remember him. He's another one of the 2018 guys. Then he was like this 400-pound like wonder of the world as a true freshman, I think. He's now listed as 6'9", 350 pounds, which you can lose 50 pounds and still be 350 pounds. That is a big dude. He opted out last year, came back to throw a touchdown pass during the spring game this year because PJ Fleck knows how to have fun in the spring game. That's good. Is he basically 100% again? I mean, it seems like they have most of the rest of their linemen back. So if he's out there, that should really give them a pretty good front.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He's back at right tackle. He opted out because of COVID last year. He had a leg injury that he missed the Outback Bowl for in 2019. So, yeah, he's a huge asset, figuratively and literally, for this offensive line. The Gophers are incredibly deep up front. There's a listserv that was put out by some sports information directors to find out who was the most experienced offensive line in college football. And I don't know what the response rate was, but of those that got back to the sports information directors, the Gophers were the most experienced with 160 combined starts. And Lele's on that list. So I think they've got 6 or 7, 8 guys that have played more than a season worth of college football starting wise. So Lele is the biggest, and he'll hold down the right tackle spot, the Gophers hope. And yeah, he's slimmed down and still 350, just to show you how much of a marvel he is.
The defensive side of the ball sounds like maybe a little bit more of a question mark because they've got most everyone back on offense. So they had a couple of defensive ends who sat out the spring game. Is that a concern moving forward, or the rotation inside? Is that a sign that they have good depth, or is that they don't have a starter they're comfortable with? Like where do things stand on the defensive line right now?
None of the injuries or guys that missed the spring game are considered serious. Boye Mafe is a freak athlete, a guy who could probably go in the first couple of rounds of the NFL draft next spring. He's their leading pass rusher. He is the guy that the Buckeyes will have to roll coverages to, roll fronts to, chip with tight ends. He is by far their best pass rusher, and he will be back in that game. Niles Pinckney was a transfer from Clemson who played over 1,000 snaps on a national championship team. He comes in and will play nose, and they have depth in the middle, and I think it's good depth. I think they've got guys that they feel are starter quality that they can rotate around. I think the defensive line is probably the strength of where they're at on that side of the ball.
Man, just thinking about Niles Pinckney going from Dabo Swinney to PJ Fleck. That is two of the better characters in college football. I bet he could tell some stories when his career is all said and done. The linebacker unit, is that, I mean, it seems like I'm kind of recalibrating my expectations for what like normal returning players are, because everyone's got all these guys back for the extra, the COVID year. Is linebacker the biggest area where there's kind of like some uncertainty going, out of fall camp or out of spring ball?
Oh, absolutely. They had Mariano Sori-Marin, who was their middle linebacker, who was much ballyhooed by PJ Fleck, and defensive coordinator Joe Rossi is kind of an extension of Joe Rossi on the field, and a guy that could really step in for Thomas Barber, the last of the Barber family, and Kamal Martin, who's now with the Packers. And he fell short of expectations. He was very poorly graded by Pro Football Focus, and kind of got better as the year went on, but kind of struggled throughout. And they brought in Jack Gibbons, who's a transfer from Abilene Christian, who is all of 6'4", 230, and played very well in a non-conference game against Virginia. So they brought him in because Mariano Sori-Marin struggled as much as he did. At the other linebacker spot, Braylon Oliver, who had some flashes as a blitzing linebacker in 2019, tore his ACL and other problems in his knee and missed all of 2020. So he's back and approaching 100%. And if he's to be able to be the same player that he was, is certainly going to bolster that unit. So yeah, it's the biggest question mark on this defense, and they're going to need to see some improvements drastically if they're going to be able to keep up with the Buckeyes.
Well, another place that they're going to have to try and keep up with the Buckeyes, the defensive backfield. I mean, they're going to get tested certainly by Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jeremy Ruckert and all on and on and on. It does, though, seem coming out of spring ball that they're reasonably comfortable with the group they have. I don't know if they are comfortable going up against the Ohio State wide receiver unit, but against most of the teams on their schedule this year, it seems like they should be reasonably well positioned to be a pretty decent defensive backfield.
Yeah, I think that matchup is a concern for anyone in college football, especially for the Gophers, who also struggled in that position group last year, especially at safety. Tyler Nubin and Jordan Howden did not have a great year last year, and were exposed with kind of their run fits and communication and where they needed to be. They had a cornerback in Benjamin St. Juste, who was taken 74th overall by the Washington Redskins, and it was the first time in 40 years that the Gophers had two guys taken in the top 40. But that leaves a hole at that other cornerback spot, and they have some guys that they feel have been improving, but they've also been offering people in the transfer portal to try to shore that up. So it kind of shows that there are still concerns within their football complex of where they're at cornerback. Coney Durr is on the other side, and he's played a lot of football and had an opportunity to go to the NFL, but decided to come back for a sixth season, and you know what you're going to get in him. But again, it's what's on that other side that's concerning. And what's going to be in the nickel spot, in the slot spot, is also maybe a question mark. So yeah, I mean that I'm sure that's causing PJ Fleck some nightmares as he thinks about September 2nd and the strength of the Buckeyes.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how willing Ryan Day is to kind of let that starting quarterback, and then whoever it is has not thrown a pass yet in college. The assumption is it's CJ Stroud. It'll be interesting to see how much he's willing to let him cut it loose, if that might be the vulnerability there against Minnesota. We mentioned the other vulnerability from last year, the kicking game that cost them a couple games last season. Is that something that they think they have under control now? Are they feeling better about that coming out of spring, or is that still kind of a concern right now?
It's still a concern coming out of spring for sure. They've got two transfers coming in. Will Mobley from Temple and Matt Trickett, who was the MAC Special Teams Player of the Year in 2019, are two of the guys that will compete with existing guys for the kicking job, and going to be a wide open competition. I would imagine that Matt Trickett is likely going to be the guy that wins it, just given his experience and success at Kent State. But yeah, it's not just the kicking game; it's the punting game, it's the coverage game. Special teams for the Gophers have really struggled over the years, and that's obviously going to be another opportunity for the Buckeyes to exploit the Gophers, because they've shown an inability to improve in that area. They've brought in some guys, especially kickers and punters, to try to get better there, and we'll see if they're able to do it in season opener.
This is PJ Fleck's fifth season at Minnesota. I mean, it seemed like you heard his name a lot in connection with open jobs, potentially after 2019, and then he's still there. So do you have a sense for whether he's someone who's going to stay at Minnesota long term, or if they have another 9-10 win season a year or two from now, Or is he going to be back in that kind of rumor mill again?
I'd imagine that he'll continue to be in that rumor mill. After 2019, he signed a 7-year contract that increased his buyout to about $10 million, which provides some sticker shock to certain programs. Obviously, not the big boys, the real blue bloods, but that went down to 4.5, and that's where it currently stands right now. So if they bounce back with their 20 returning seniors and their influx of 6 or so transfers that they feel can contribute, if they're able to bounce back to something approaching 10 wins, I imagine that PJ Fleck's name comes up again just because of his culture, his positivity, his young age at 40, the fact that he's had success at Minnesota, had huge success at Western Michigan. I'd imagine that his name comes up, but at the same time, I know that every year he's had either rollover contract extensions or multi-year contract extensions, and if that success comes, I'd imagine that Mark Coyle and his agent, PJ Fleck, sit down and hammer out another extension that changes the buyout figure to kind of keep moving things along here at Minnesota. I think that they are establishing something. I think that he's happy here. So I think that that's probably the first page of the playbook. And unless there's somebody that is really, kind of an unbelievable opportunity, he'll likely find a way to stay in Minnesota.
Is he really only 40? You said that, and I was like, that can't be right. But then, I mean, he was in GA under Tressel, so 40 years old. Goodness. I'm feeling old and very unaccomplished right now. You got to remember, he had took Western Michigan to the Cotton Bowl, won a New Year's Day bowl game at Minnesota. Like, yeah, I think he can coach a little football. Yep. It sounds like they are hoping for a full house for that Ohio State game. Are they still looking like they're at least kind of on track for that to potentially happen?
Yeah, that's what PJ Fleck said last week. That's what the Gophers are planning for. Obviously, it's where things are with the virus and the response to it. They're looking at other pro sports here in the Twin Cities as a benchmark. Minnesota United, the MLS team, is going to be close to 100% here in a couple of weeks. The Twins are going to be ramping up how many they have. So the Gophers are going to be watching that closely. And if the virus continues to stay stagnant or on its way down, then yeah, they can have another sellout here, and that would be 3 straight for Minnesota, which is nothing to the Buckeyes, but is a big deal here at Minnesota because it'll be 3 in a row and something that they haven't had for another 10 years prior.
The trip to Minnesota is much more appealing now than it was in 2014 when the game time temperature was like 12 degrees or something like that. It should be much warmer than that for September 2nd. The night before that, yes, the Twins are in town. Twins play the Cubs. I will be there. Tony Gerdeman, and I'm sure will be joining me there. But for people making the trip to Minnesota for the game, do you have any recommendations on like great places to eat, either on campus or on the Twin Cities, or stuff to do beyond the obvious, like, hey, go see the Mall of America? Like any good local stuff that people should be checking out? Yeah,
for sure. I think Shirley Brewery is probably about 4 or 5 blocks from TCF Bank Stadium, and that's one of the best breweries in the state of Minnesota. It's within walking distance. Probably go from your tailgate to there and back. There's Sally's, there's Stub and Herbs, which are also kind of right on campus for a campus feel. If people do go to the Twins game the night before, there's the North Loop neighborhood that has breweries like Fulton and Modest and Free House and a bunch of different restaurants in kind of an up and coming neighborhood. And you take the light rail from there, from downtown Minneapolis over to the stadium at TCF Bank Stadium. So it's all can be a pretty urban, condensed, hopscotch around, have a few, and not have to worry about getting behind the car of a rental. So
those are my kind of restaurant recommendations. A lot of didn't hear a lot about food. That's okay. That's all right. You think you have a good sense for the Ohio State traveling fan base. Let's put it that way. Can you let people know where they can find you on Twitter and then where they can read your work?
Yeah, it's at twincities.com and at Andy Greder on Twitter.
All right. Well, Andy, really appreciate you taking time to fill us in, and we'll see you up in Minneapolis in just a couple months.
Sounds great.
All right. And thanks again to Andy for letting us know a little bit more about the Gophers. Sounds like that is going to be a very, very interesting team to watch this year. A lot of talent coming back, but off a team that was a little down last year. So it could go a whole lot of different ways this year for PJ Fleck and his crew. But yes, that is going to be a very inviting time of year to be up in the Twin Cities. So if you're thinking about making that trip, might be a fun year to do it. That'll do it for us today. Make sure you check out all of our great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify. We're all there. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of them. And you can subscribe right there. Leave us a 5-star rating and review, which will help other folks find those shows. You can check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Again, subscribe there. And then you'll get notified every time we drop a new video. We put all of our podcasts up there. We put all of our interviews with players and coaches up there. We put everything we do. It's been camps are back for Ohio State football. So a lot of player interviews, camp videos, all that kind of stuff. All the kind of stuff we haven't been able to do for the last year, we can finally do now. It's all at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. And of course, at buckeyescoop.com, our team of insiders. This is just another crazy month. This is going to be a really, really, really interesting month to see with all the visits, the commitments, potential decommitments, flips, transfer portal. We have a fantastic team of insiders that can keep you up to date on all of it, let you know not only what just happened, but also what's going to happen next. That's at buckeyescoop.com. Sign up to become a member today, and you have a chance to win 4 tickets to the Oregon game from Nevada Buck. Pretty good seats, I'm going to guess. You just have to sign up to become a member today at buckeyescoop.com. Sign up anytime before the 4th of July, and you'll be eligible for that drawing. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.